Steven Universe and all associated images are property of Cartoon Network, Rebecca Sugar, and any and all other respective owners. I don't know them all. All footage in this video has been used for the purpose of critique parody under fair use. Please support the official release. Well guys, once again we have learned more about the Gem Civil War, about the history of gems on Earth, so once again it is time for me to revise my timeline of those events. I'm still calling it a Gem Civil War timeline, even though it covers more than just the Civil War at this point. Just keep that in mind. Whereas in my last video on this topic I had to suppose quite a lot, now we actually know the majority of the key events in the war. Events from the beginning, the middle, and the end. Combine that with what additional facts we already know from the show and from the crew, and it's not hard to determine, roughly, how events in the war went. We know from dialogue in the series that the Prime Kindergarten was established 6,000 years ago. With the exception of scouts, I believe that this is the first time that gems arrived on Earth, as I do still think that the planet was scouted out first, possibly by whichever gems finally constructed the moon base, as it does seem like the moon base, and therefore the moon itself, was used as an observation station from which to watch the Earth. Then, at some point, construction gems came to the planet and erected structures and probably dug out the kindergarten as well. I think these gems were probably part of Blue Diamond's court, as I have suggested elsewhere that either Blue Diamond or the color blue seems to be associated with most gem buildings. It would have been shortly after this that the diamond in charge of the planet actually arrived, with her forces. And we know now that that diamond was Pink Diamond. This is when Rose would have come as well, about 6,000 years ago. And it also would have been at about this time that the first batch of gems would have been implanted in the Prime Kindergarten, that being the batch that Amethyst was supposed to be a part of. Then at some point over about the next 300 years, Rose decided that she wanted to fight to protect the Earth rather than continue colonizing it, which would eventually destroy it. Or at least transform it into something completely unlike what it was. She told only her Pearl, and her Pearl decided to stay and fight with her. This leads to the events of the Answer, where Rose and her terrifying renegade Pearl attacked the court of Blue Diamond, confirming that even though Blue Diamond wasn't in charge of the Earth colony, she did have something to do with its construction, as Rose attacked her specifically in an attempt to try to halt development of the colony. As it was only her and Pearl who attacked Blue Diamond's Sky Arena, it can be assumed that they were, at the time, the only crystal gems, with the possible exception of Bismuth, since Pearl did have swords at the time, and it was stated by Bismuth that she created all of the material weapons that the crystal gems used during the rebellion. However, while Rose's actions at this point were rebellious, it's clear that the battles being fought at the time were not at a scale great enough to be called a war. And we know from dialogue by Pearl that the war didn't start until 5,500 years ago, not roughly 5,700 years ago. And while it's definitely possible that she was rounding, that it wasn't exactly 5,500 years ago, I think if the war had begun earlier than that, she would be rounding to a number that was earlier than that. And just like I stated in my last version of this video, I do think that the reason that the rebellion escalated into an all-out war was because the gems from the Prime Kindergarten emerged. Some of them sided with Rose, but most of them went to Homeworld. After all, we know almost 100% for sure now that at least some of the kindergarten gems sided with Rose. As Bismuth says to Amethyst, we could always use more amethysts, suggesting that other amethysts from the Prime Kindergarten joined their cause. It's also been confirmed in series that the war lasted 1,000 years. So if the war began 5,500 years ago, it would have been roughly 4,500 years ago when it ended. But now we know so much of what happened in the middle. We know that Bismuth was poofed and bubbled by Rose before the death of Pink Diamond, as the last battle that she remembers taking place in was the Battle of Strawberry Battlefield, or whatever that place was called back then. We now know that the Battle of Strawberry Battlefield took place early in the war. It's likely at this battle that Lapis was poofed by Bismuth, and then found by members of her own side and imprisoned in the mirror to be questioned under suspicion of being a crystal gem. We can also assume that some of the holographic battle scenes that we've seen, if not all of them, also take place at the Battle of the Strawberry Battlefield, as we see Rose very prominently wielding her sword in those scenes, and we know that she had her sword at the Battle of Strawberry Battlefield since she lost the sheath at that time. It probably wasn't long after that battle that Bismuth confronted Rose about the idea of using the breaking point against enemy gems in an attempt to assassinate the diamonds. Rose, at the time, wasn't ready for such a drastic step, and she and Bismuth came to blows, and Bismuth ended up being poofed and bubbled. The war would have continued on normally from there, with Rose and her forces actually posing a threat to Homeworld, enough so that the leader of the colony, Pink Diamond, had to rush to establish a second kindergarten at about the halfway point. And we do know that it was Pink Diamond who established the kindergarten, as gems that emerged from that kindergarten emerged being told that they belonged to Pink Diamond. If Pink Diamond had already been shattered at the time of the establishment of the kindergarten, another gem would have taken over control of the colony, established the kindergarten, and the new kindergarten gems would have emerged believing that they belonged to that diamond instead. However, we also know that Jasper emerged and immediately began fighting because of something that she learned that Rose had done to her diamond, to Pink Diamond. And it is very heavily implied that that thing that she did was the shattering of Pink Diamond, meaning that the shattering of Pink Diamond occurred between 5,000 and roughly 4,700 to 4,800 years ago. Technically speaking, it could have happened as the kindergarten was being built, as all that Pink Diamond would have had to do was give the order, and the kindergarten still would have been hers. So as of now, I'm going to guess that Pink Diamond's death occurred at about 4,900 years ago. That means that Pink Diamond was in control of the Earth colony from 6,000 years ago to about 5,000 years ago, meaning that the principal occupation of the Earth by the gems was about 1,000 years long, which is perfectly in line with statements made by the crew. I'm fairly certain that the moment that Pink Diamond was shattered was the moment that Homeworld decided to give up on the Earth, only remaining for the next few hundred years in order to research and then finally implant the cluster. Because it uses the new Diamond Authority symbol, we also know that the Pyramid Temple was built at roughly this time as well, and based on the nature of the tests that it employed, it can be assumed that it was made to test the capabilities of human beings. Though as I said, I'm fairly certain that Homeworld had decided to abandon the planet at this point, so why they felt it was necessary to test humans is beyond me. Then, once the cluster was implanted, the remaining 3 diamonds sounded a retreat and fired off the corruption blast, as I've been calling it. And as it appears that the corruption blast was fired off from high orbit, it's safe to assume that all 3 of the remaining diamonds did escape the planet. So these guys, unfortunately, are most likely not diamonds. However, at least some Homeworld gems did get left behind, including Lapis Lazuli, trapped in the mirror still, and the Centipedal and her crew. It would have been at about this time that the crystal gems would have returned to the kindergarten just to make sure everything was still in order, and found Amethyst, who had been immersed for about 500 years at that point, as we know with certainty that she was not found before the end of the conflict. And that's about it. We now have a beginning, middle, and end for the war. There's still about a 500-year period in there between the point when all-out war broke out and the point where Pink Diamond was shattered that we don't know much about, except that at some point Rose realized that the only way to actually force Homeworld's hand and make any real progress in the war was to kill Pink Diamond. But I'm confident that we'll learn more about that period in time as the series progresses. Still, this is the most correct I feel that the timeline has ever been, and as this is the most up-to-date version of this video, this is the timeline that I will be referencing in all of my theories going forward that actually require referencing the timeline of the war. Guys, what do you think of this most recent revised timeline? Are you as confident about it as I am, or do you feel that when it comes to the war, only time will tell? Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.